And Charlie, what is, mindset to you, and why
good
is it
question.
so, and why is it so important for property investing? Like, because that's, like, I imagine it starts with the mindset, or yeah, can you talk to that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, right? I think like for a lot of people, mindset gets put in this like woo woo category, and then
Mm-hmm.
it's like it becomes so ambiguous and like so mysterious that we just dispel it. It's like no, it couldn't be your mindset. It's having all the properties. That's the thing, right? No, it couldn't be. Oh, sorry, water bottle down. Point being is like mindset is like it's a very very critical part of the journey, and I would make the argument that I don't think anyone gets anywhere without a certain mindset. So like for a lot of people, the thoughts you have leads to the actions you take. Like, is anyone going to buy a property if they think it's going to lead them to bankruptcy? No, but
No,
like that's the mindset,
hopefully not.
right? So it all comes from there. I'll share some experiences here because I'm
Please.
for most of my life, I felt very different than other people. And a lot of the choices I've made have led to different experiences that have only made me more different than other people. And I'll give you some here. I have after my first business, I sold my first business. I started a new business and I got it to about the same level as the first business. And even though I was in a different industry, working with different people, right, selling something different, right, I had all the same problems. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, oh, I won't say the word because I'm like, there's a common denominator. Me. Shit. And I'm like, so I had this like moment of epiphany after my first company into my second, that it's like we play such a crucial role in the journey. And like after that point, instead of studying more business stuff, I actually took a year and spent a year on personal development. And I went and said that if I'm ever going to achieve anything more in business, I'm going to be the limiter. Like it won't matter if I sell this business and do another one or close it down and do another one. Like I'm going to keep rubbing up against this if I don't take this change. So I took a full year to work on myself and make some improvements in myself, money psychology, like a whole few things there. And then after that, when I was able to compound my business skills with my new personal development skills, that was like a multiplier. We went on to like do substantially bigger things from there.
One of the other questions I have is around the questions that you ask your professionals to get the best out of them, to identify, you know what, that guy's good. I need to have a conversation with him. Were there some key questions let's just start with a mortgage broker, for instance, and then maybe rattle off the rest of the team.
I'll tell you the story of how I met Aaron, right? It's like I actually spoke to Aaron today. He's like,
this is a love story dedicated to Aaron. This is Aaron
kindred
Wybrow,
spirits.
diagnostic
I'm taking
and
it next
finances.
Friday, by the way. I think
Jeff,
probably.
pop the link below to Aaron's business here. This is great.
Yeah, so I was actually a keynote speaker at a mortgage broker mastermind event. So I had gone to this event to teach some business owners about the things I was doing online, and it was a group full of mortgage brokers. Now, at this point, I didn't know the mortgage industry well or even the property game that well. Now, I spoke at this event and like I noticed something that in the room, it's like what tends to happen is there's magnets. And what I mean by that is like when you go to an event, you'll notice certain people attract people towards them. Like the groups will hover around them and like they be the one that people go to. You'll also notice that certain people in a room get asked the questions because they're like perceivably the ones that have the answers. And it became pretty clear to me at that event. It was like, I think Aaron is the one they're trying to learn some stuff from. Like people are asking him things. He's not one of the ones asking questions. He's one of the ones receiving questions. And me and Aaron literally met doing barefoot bowls in some like hipster place in Melbourne. And it was fascinating to me that when I left that event, I was like, this is the dude I want doing my broking. Like this is the guy. And I think when you can find those types of people in the industry, these are the ones operating on the absolute edge. And these are the people that can make all the difference. Now, you asked a really good question about like when you're trying to form like your wealth team, which I think everyone should, right? You should have a wealth team around you. Like, what are the things I would ask or potentially do it? The first thing is like, how have you helped people that are in my situation? Right, this is the most important question. Like someone might have, I've done, heaps of 10 property portfolios. Yeah, all the billionaires' kids. right? Yeah, easy, right? It's like, okay, cool. What
Yeah.
about for business owners if you're a business owner? Or what about, like, I understand there's particular lending policies if you're in medical or if you're in the defense force. Like, I think if you are in a certain or specific circumstance, you want to make sure that your team has done this before. They're not learning on you. This is just like, cool, I've just got to do what I did last week for this person this week. Right? I think that is the most powerful questions you can ask your team, and that's like who you should be seeking after. The second thing I'll say is that, like, this group is amazing. I've met some really cool people in the Oz property investors groups, and many I would now call friends, right? And I look at it and go, ask them who they use. Like, build your shortlist just purely off that. And like, I think there is an amazing opportunity for people to upgrade the team they have and get a substantially better result through kind of following a method like that.
You grew your portfolio from whatever it was, but you acquired assets incredibly quickly. And one of the things that I chat to people, it's like, oh, I'm not going to buy another one until this one settles. But you bought multiple properties before the others settled. Like, how long were you planning this entire acquisition phase? Like, what did that look like before? Because pulling the trigger on a property, that's the easy bit. You can really mess up the planning up to that point. Like, you've been investing in property for the last, 10 years because you're building up to that point. What is it? Yeah. What does some of that preparation and planning look like, and how much went into that before you went, boom, let's do it?
I love this analogy. I think it helps many people understand is that if you're riding a bike, right, you only need a few dials to really be able to manage it. If you're in a jet plane, you need a lot of dials to be able to manage it because you're going to be doing way more high risk and extreme stuff. So when it came to what we attempted, I had, well, in summary, is like I knew I was going to have a few good years in business where I was going to be able to take advantage of extreme borrowing power. And the way we went about acquiring our properties was to do it quickly to take advantage of those financial years and also of tax and how our books needed to be set up and everything. So when we started to realize what was going to be possible, the first thing we dialed into was looking at the team who would be able to help us execute this. So we could get feedback from people that had done it before. So for example, our broker, for example, if he knew he was going to have to be lending one thing into the next, is that we needed to make sure we weren't going to have anything in a position that would limit lending down the road. Or if we purchase a certain type of property that would then prevent us to going to the next one. So you had to be very like forward thinking. And then you also had to be very like strategic around that. So one of the things we've actually done in the last 12 months, which again, it's like rather painful experience, but I'm so thrilled to have such a good team, is actually refinancing. Because we knew in going through the process of going fast, we were going to have to take on options that weren't ideal for the long term. So we would get a loan with a lender because we could get it now and quickly. But then we knew a year later we're going to refinance it with someone else because
but you're paying an extra percent or so in interest, but you get into that asset.
Yeah, that's the price of speed.
What do you think about interest rates?
It's a knowable risk. Like it's a really interesting thing. It's like I like personally I don't enjoy rates going up. I don't think anyone does. Right? Like let's cut around that. But it's something where the possibility of that happening was there, but I don't think anyone expected it to happen so quickly. Like, and even for myself, when you go through that, it certainly rocks you to a degree. But where we were calculated is because of the rules we had in place, is that we've got significant buffers and deposits put in where we are less affected by that. So the first thing I do is like, thank you, previous Charley, for not getting stupid with debt. Because if you did, like these are the moments where you could come undone and be brought into a forced sale. So I don't think anyone knows what's happening with rates. I think everyone needs to decide what they're comfortable with that will allow them to sleep at night. Because I suspect there's investors all around the country that are certainly feeling the pinch and the stress about this, going, oh, maybe I'll have to sell an asset, like reconsidering things, or just taking unfavorable positions. And I think that can hurt a lot of people. The other side of it is like one of the reasons I set my position up like I do is like quite conservative is because when carnage comes, that's when the opportunities are. So if rates get to 10%, right, it's the guys who can buy then that make the killing. It's not the guys that had to sell. So I think there's a bit of a reframe opportunity for people in going like, am I positioned to seize opportunities if carnage comes out? And I'm not saying you should pray for disaster zones or anything, but history tells us they come. And when they are you going to be the one that's ready to pull the trigger on that? So for me, I want to be in a position to do those types of things. So risk mitigation, things from there. Now, not being in too deep where things like interest rates like rock you, I think critical. And if you're in one of those positions, like take it as a learning moment of going, I don't like this is happening. I'm going to work through this here. And then next time this comes around, I'm going to be ready.
Like, how did you plan out acquiring 8 assets in 15 months? Like, what did that actually look like? And what type of assets were they as well? Because I think that would give a bit of color to the situation, because most people just can't buy. They just don't think like that. So I love the mindset behind it. You went into it hard and said, I know what I want. I want this end outcome. How am I going to get there? Well, I'm going to get your people, your team, your A team, and then we're all going to work together on this. But yeah, what were the kind of assets and how did you actually do it?
Great question. So the first thing is like, why this many assets? And it's like, that was the number required to get to the goal. If it was one, I just would have bought one. If it's 40, I'd have 40. Like I couldn't, again, outcome focused. I think it's too much of a pissing contest on how many properties people have. And it's like, it doesn't really mean anything. That's one of those, in my opinion, stupid games. It's like, I'm much more interested.
Entirely.
Yeah. So then the second part is like, I looked at my situation. So I got the income I have and our books and savings. And then I go, okay, what's the most efficient path to achieving that with the risk I'm willing to take on? And I spoke to many people. Like I didn't land on, like I didn't, meet a broker down the street and go, I'm going to use this guy and then go, oh, what's a buyer's agent, and pick the first one. Like I interviewed many. I went and understood their different approaches and why they would work or suggest things versus others. And then ultimately the thing that I really resonated with was the idea that if you could buy certain assets that created a positive cash flow, still wanted it to be a growth asset, we're playing this hybrid game, that every asset I would acquire wouldn't slow down the borrowing, because the borrowing is going to be the thing that ultimately stops people. So if I went a heavily negatively geared strategy, I would have got stopped at 2 or 3. And then we would have had to pause. But if I was acquiring assets and leaving a big enough deposit from business profits, that this would actually like turn into a multiplier. The thing we didn't expect though is that we were right before the COVID boom. So as we were going into this, all my properties started getting valued up and up and up, and rents started climbing at the same time. So we actually got to shorten the timeline. So every time I was going back to the broker, or going back to Aaron, being he's on there and did an excellent thing, is like he wasn't saying no. Like it was almost we were saying no, because we were like feeling like we're in a washing machine from like going from one property invest to the next, or this one's got to settle. And like it was a very interesting time to be doing what we were doing. And again, we were thinking that this time's going to scare a lot of people. There's going to be a lot of people out there that aren't going to seize these opportunities because they're dealing with the series of the work. So we kind of saw it as like, this is our advantage. Like us being in a position to act while so many people are in disarray or fearful, like that's where the best opportunities were to come. And like we did incredibly well from that.
There's a couple of things, and I think I know the answer to one of these is the it sounds like on those 8 purchases, you weren't comfortable going above 80% LVR. So you sort of kept it, wanted to keep below that. And the second one is you mentioned about yield that would keep enable you to keep on borrowing. So what was that sort of magic? And there's not really a magic number, but let's pretend there's a magic number. What number were you looking at? And LVR, you wanted it below 80 from the sounds of it.
Yeah. So one of the things I really like to do is like put rules in place that stop me from me. Because like I'm
great idea.
I can't be trusted, right, at times. Yeah. So like I ask myself the question, like when we look at property, the temptation to get stupid with lending is high. So high. It's ridiculous, right? And I'm like, 95%. equity out from one to the other. Wait, well, you can go to this bank and get this valuation, and this one over here, we can kind of like, I'm sure we've all been there. I'm still in there. And I went like, what can I put in place where it's like, it will be really hard if I follow these rules to mess up badly. And I said, all right, number one, I'm not going to pick any of the properties. I'm going to pay a professional who does this for a living. I'm very good at what I do in my work. I want someone who's very good when it comes to picking these properties, because that way I'm attaining all the experience and knowledge and know-how they have. So I'm always using a buyer's agent. Like I am the worst. I get on real estate. I'm even worse because I send my buyer's agent and mortgage broker properties I find. I'm like, boys, we should buy this. Look at this thing here. And they're like, this is ridiculous. I'm sure they charge me extra just for the bullshit that I send them and have to deal with, but that's fine. So like that was rule number one, is like, I didn't want to have something that I'm not an expert in, particularly with picking a property when the risk of buying a lemon is so high.
Yeah.
Right? So, rule number two, use people that have done it before. Right. So when one of the things that I loved about Aaron particularly is like, he understood me as a business owner, like in a ridiculous way, where I felt many of the brokers I'd worked with had more worked with people with employment. So business owners, we're a unique breed. I'm not going to say better. We're definitely not better. We're just different. So we need people
there's no good
understand.
or bad, just different.
Very exact on that one. So that was another one we really brought in place, was like using people that had done it. And it's like fascinatingly substantially easier when they can go, oh, this is what I did for the last person. Here are the steps. Yeah. So using experience was another one. Number three is that for every property, 20% deposit plus buying expenses that I come up with from my business profits. I do not use equity.
So we're talking stamp duty, we're talking legals, all stuff comes from.
Sorry, what was that? What? Just go do that.
So you got to have a 20% deposit. So whatever, if a property is $1 million, you got to have 200 grand plus the stamp duty, plus the buyer's agent fees, plus anything that will get it to purchase, and a buffer to put in the offset account. So that when you've purchased that asset, like you're literally putting like probably the equivalent of 30% down. Now, if you're putting 30% down on every asset, like I've got to go and earn that 30% to make that deposit. And if I don't have that, I won't actually buy. But then on the other side of things, if you're leaving this substantial of a deposit, well, the cash flow's higher because you own more of your property than someone who borrows 100%. And then for borrowing onto the next one, it becomes easier because I'm not like creating substantially more things. Now, again, I'm not saying these rules are for other people to take on or as their own. Like these are things I put in place for me to protect me from me. Now, I'm sure we can agree, like if you look at these rules, it's like, Charlie, it's getting harder to fuck this up. Now, you do have to go earn a substantially amount more money, but it's like you will likely prevent doing some crazily stupid things that could lead to wipeout, which was my indication from there.
How did you decide on the types of renovations that you needed? Like, how did you say, oh, well, did you speak to your property managers? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so this has actually all been through the property managers. We asked our property managers the question of like, is there anything we could do to this property to improve it that would increase rents? And then all the property managers were also incredibly helpful in like, they've got trades and access to trades to quote things. Like this is something where they have insider knowledge. So our property managers have been fantastic and incredibly helpful in that regard there. And particularly we've got a guy called Scott, which I don't think you'll see this, but nonetheless, he's been very, very awesome up in Queensland in like actually helping us execute some of these like property improvements and helping us with things.